We now come to the backbench debate on prisoners of conscience, and I call Jim Shannon to move. Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House is considered prisoners of conflict. And there's many people who would like to have been here today, Madam Deputy Speaker, but unfortunately we're unable to due to other commitments, and we know what those are and what's happening today across this great nation in relation to that. But today we gather in this esteemed House not simply to address issues of the moment, but to reflect on principles that define our humanity and collective our moral obligations. It's been an honour for me over the past 12 years to be involved in many debates in this one and our topic today, prisoners of conscience. This topic is one that's close to my heart and close to many others who are here today and many others who unfortunately have been unable to attend. We speak not for ourselves, but we speak for the voiceless. So I take seriously the tenets of my faith as others do, and a verse which I often recall in times like this is found in Proverbs 31 verses 8 and 9. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. I know that these ideals are held by so many in this chamber, regardless of their religious persuasion. The issue calls us to uphold our shared values and support and assist those who are less fortunate than ourselves. Those prisoners of conscience who lie in a state of somewhat despair for their faith or unbelief, they're not criminals. They are instead, they're doctors, they're teachers, they're artists, they're writers, they're pastors, they're journalists, and they're all people of faith. Their so-called crime is to think freely, to believe openly, to speak honestly. Prisoners of conscience are individuals who are in prison not for any crime committed, but for their beliefs, their expression of thought, or their unwavering commitment to their values. These individuals are a testament to the human spirit's resilience against tyranny. It is important for us to remember that they are members of our global family, our brothers and sisters, deserving of our advocacy and our support. And as we turn our attention to Articles 18 and 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948, a pivotal document that has laid the foundation for our understanding of human rights worldwide. Article 18 states, and I quote, "Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. This right includes freedom to change their religion or their belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest their religion or their belief in teaching, practice, worship and observance." Those words should be very clear what Article 18 means. It means freedom to express yourself in whatever way you wish in relation to your religious beliefs. I should have said, welcome the Minister to her place. The Minister always speaks very well on these matters, and we look forward very much to her response. I don't think any of us will be found wanting in relation to what we're asking for today. Also, a pleasure to see the Shadow Minister in his place as well, and others who are going to contribute. These rights of teaching, practice, worship and observance, they're not optional. They're not cultural. Instead, they are universal. Yet in 2025, we stand amid a global crisis of conscience. Around the world, thousands sit in cells, unjustly detained, tortured, silenced for merely professing their faith or upholding their convictions. This is not hypothetical. This is happening every day, all day, for many people. According to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, as of 2024, at least 72 Christians are either imprisoned or missing in 4 of the world's 5 communist countries. Specifically, 52 Christians are currently imprisoned in China, in Cuba, in North Korea and Vietnam, with another 20 missing. In North Korea alone, an estimated 80,000 to 120,000 individuals, many of whom are Christian, are detained in prisons. Article 18 enshrines the fundamental right of individuals to hold their beliefs, whether they be spiritual, political, philosophical, and to express these beliefs freely and openly. Very happy to give way, yes.
I'm grateful. Would he agree with me? He's making a very powerful case, and he always speaks with such passion and conviction, that one of the worst examples is the Armenian prisoners of war detained by Azerbaijan. These are people that have not broken any criminal code, as he says, but they're public servants held for political purposes. with no clear legal redress or access or even clear grounds as to why they're being held. Would you not agree with me that international law should dictate here and not just someone's own internal domestic politics where they're marking their own homework? And also praise Annette Moscofian, my constituent, who represents the Armenians in the UK. And the Minister can be assured I'll be right in terms with some of Annette's demands after this debate.
Ma'am, I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention. She's right to bring the issue of the Armenians. There's been the Armenian genocide. We can go back even further. We can remember what happened there. But the Honourable Lady has outlined the case for those prisoners of conscience and prisoners of conflict in Armenia. And I know the Minister has taken note of those there and will undoubtedly come back to the Honourable Lady quite soon. Thank you for that intervention. As we all know, thousands find themselves in prisons across the globe, not because they have violated laws, but because they have dared to articulate beliefs that challenge powerful interests or unpopular narratives. They are individuals who stand firm in their convictions at great personal cost. I admire any person who takes a stand on something that they believe in fundamentally and strongly. It's unacceptable that in the 21st century we continue to witness the persecution of such individuals, from China to Iran, from Russia to Nigeria. The oppressive actions against those who seek simply to express their beliefs and who have faced unjust detention for simply exercising their rights. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect, unfortunately, systematic state hostility towards religion and belief, particularly under communist regimes. As the Nobel laureate Alexander Solzhenitsyn warned in 1983, hatred of God is the principal driving force behind the communist policy. Militant atheism is not incidental, it is essential to communist control. Let me also be clear, the persecution is not limited just to Christians alone, but it's to Muslims, to Baha'is, to Falun Gong practitioners, to the Hindus, to the Jews, to the Shias, to the Sunnis, and many, many others who face repression across the globe. Freedom of religion or belief is a human right, not a privilege of one faith or nation. It's something we all have individually. As chair of the APPG for freedom of religious belief, it's an honour to make mention of this topic, to help these individuals. It's my belief, Madam Deputy, that we must take a stand against this injustice, which is why we ask for this debate today. We must remind those in power that the voices of dissent, that freedom of thought, the consciousness and religion represent not merely an individual right, but is foundational to a democratic society, and that their offences are not going unnoticed. Today, we bring it to the attention of all those places across the world where it is happening. Let us affirm our commitment to liberty by remembering the ongoing struggles faced by prisoners of conscience around the world. May we encourage our constituents, my constituents encourage me every day, and communities, to keep them in the thoughts and prayers while working together through advocacy and informed action, to champion the values enshrined in Article 18 and to promote the many benefits that these freedoms bring to societies that uphold them as well. Alongside Article 18, we must consider Article 19, which states everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Opinion and expression are the bedrocks of any vibrant society, any society that wishes to do well and wishes to take its people with it in unison. They enable societies to grow, to thrive. When we suppress dissent, we undermine progress itself. There are thousands of prisoners. How can we respond to these innumerable violations of human rights? How can we begin to make a difference? This story is well known, I think probably everybody in the chamber. I often think of the analogy of the wee boy on the beach with the starfish, and the adult says, "We can't save them all," and the wee boy says, "I can save this one." We have the power to advocate loudly and clearly, not just for the release of prisoners of conscience, but also for the root causes of this duress to be confronted and dismantled through sustained diplomatic pressure, through international cooperation and the strengthening of legal and institutional protections for freedom of religion or belief. It is our responsibility, I believe, to challenge the environments, be they legal, be they political, be they ideological, that allow such injustices to persist, and to ensure that no individual is ever imprisoned for living according to their conscience. I call on government to prioritise the issue of freedom of religious belief violations in diplomatic dialogues. I know our Minister does that. I believe our government does that. But I think for the purposes of this debate today, we seek that reassurance in relation to that. Particularly with states known for systematic abuse. We can think of many of them already. China, Russia, Iran, just as 3 examples, and North Korea. We must sanction individuals responsible for religious persecution, and we must fund and support civil society groups working to secure prisoner releases. Let us stand united in our unwavering commitment to uphold the principles enshrined in the freedom to change their religion or belief, and freedom, if it is their choice. Together let us be that voice for the voiceless, Madam Deputy Speaker, the hope for the hopeless, those who probably will never see this debate, but they need to be reassured that we are speaking for them in the way that we should. Out of the thousands who are currently held in this awful state, I would like to mention some of these prisoners of conscience. Let the record show we have not forgotten. And I just want to name, I'm not going to go into all the details, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I think it's important we have them on record. Jimmy Lai, a pro-democracy activist and a media tycoon in Hong Kong, imprisoned for his advocacy for freedom of the press, and a British citizen. We haven't forgot about him either. Sahar Madavi, an Iranian woman detained for participating in peaceful protests advocating for women's rights. My Ulster Scots accent will destroy these names. Yahya Sharif Aminu, a Nigerian gospel musician sentenced to death for allegedly blasphemous lyrics in a song shared on WhatsApp. Rena Gulgeni, a Uyghur woman detained in China for practicing her faith. Muji Day Falhayi, an Iranian Christian convert imprisoned for her religious beliefs. Keo Thi Tuk, a Vietnamese Christian leader arrested for her religious activities. P. Mum Bia, a Montegard Christian from Vietnam, detained for his faith. Maveh Sabat, a member of the Baha'i community in Iran, imprisoned for her religious beliefs. Nguyen Bac Truyen, a Vietnamese human rights lawyer and religious freedom advocate, imprisoned for his activism. Maria Shabazz, a Pakistan Christian teenager abducted and forced into a marriage and conversion, now seeking asylum. Mubarak Bala, a Nigerian humanist, sentenced to 24 years in prison for blasphemy. His faith, his right to have his views, is as important as all the rest. Abdul Baki Sahid Abdo, a Yemeni Christian convert, imprisoned for his faith. Nasser Navad Goltapa, an Iranian Christian convert, sentenced to 10 years in prison for acting against national security. And Leah Sharabu, a Nigerian schoolgirl abducted by Boko Haram and held captive for refusing to renounce her Christian faith. Most recently, I've looked at this case in particular, is of the continued imprisonment of Chinese dissident Dr. Wang Bingjiang, founder of China Spring magazine, a leader of the overseas China pro-democracy movement and a permanent resident of the United States. Dr. Wang Bingjiang was kidnapped while travelling to Vietnam in 2002, taken to the People's Republic of China, and sentenced to life imprisonment for his activism after a trial which lasted half a day, was closed to the public, and where he was denied the right to due process and a fair trial. He has been held in solitary confinement throughout his 23 years in prison so far, and that his physical and mental health have seriously declined. The United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention declared that the detention of Wang Bingjiang is arbitrary, being in contravention of Articles 9, 10 and 11 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that the Congressional Resolution 326 in the 108th United States Congress of 2003-2004 resolved that Dr. Wang Bingjiang is being arbitrarily detained in the People's Republic of China in violation of international law. It's quite clear that he should be released, and he's been in prison for 23 years. The international case is clear, and I believe we should coordinate with the Government of the United States in efforts to seek the release of Dr. Wang Bixiang and a safe, immediate and unconditional return to the United States from the People's Republic of China. Could he be one of the starfish saved whilst acknowledging that we can't do it all, we can only save some? We must keep hope alive. In this debate, I hope today will keep that hope alive for all those people. As Luke 4:18 reminds us, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to proclaim liberty to the captives and to set at liberty those who are oppressed. Let us proclaim that liberty and not forget that the daily plight of prisoners of conscience, alongside faith groups, international allies, NGOs and parliamentarians worldwide, because this is not just our fight, the UK's fight, this is the world's fight, this is humanity's fight for every one of those people. The House is aware that I have a Special Envoy Bill second reading scheduled, and I do this because I believe we can do more. And today, as I think of prisoners of conscience, I also think of the persecuted Church of Christ and those who are persecuted simply because of their faith across the world. We cannot save them all, but we can do more to save some. So I look to government to stand up and stand alongside them and send this message that the treatment of human rights for those who are a minority will impact upon trade deals, upon our government aid programmes, upon all aspects of international involvement. This is about one thing alone. It's about freedom to express yourself in the way that we do in this country and have that right. It matters to a prisoner of conscience. It matters to the families. It matters to the politicians. It matters to this House. And I hope that the Minister and Government will take the opportunity today to show that it also matters to them. Thank you very much.
The question is as on the order paper. Sir Desmond Swayne.
Thank you. It's an enormous privilege to follow my honourable friend, who is a tremendous advocate for those who are voiceless. Can I begin by reiterating the importance of the questions that he's raised and ask the Minister to address in her winding up the question of what action has followed the telephone call between the Prime Minister and President Sisi on the question of pursuing the release of Alaa Abdel Fattah, and indeed also is there any kind of plan for securing the release of Jimmy Lai? Madam Deputy Speaker, we have had many prisoners of conscience of our own. At random, off the top of my head, Thomas More, Dr. Barnes, Latimer and Ridley, Cranmer, Archbishop Lord, even John Bunyan in Bedford Jail. A free Parliament that had the will to do so could have campaigned for their release, and history might have been significantly different. The problem for us now is that the prisoners of conscience are well beyond our jurisdiction. And so when we raise cases with ministers, often enough, we have no leverage whatsoever with the jurisdictions that have imprisoned them. And we can no longer simply deploy the Royal Navy, as we might have done in the past, and as indeed we did when we deployed it to eradicate the scandal of the international slave trade. Even in those jurisdictions where we do have alliances and shared national interests and good diplomatic relations, often enough, governments have bigger fish to fry with respect to regional security and stability and international trade. And so when we raise cases with ministers, we're told that, oh, these were raised at the highest level. As indeed, I, when I was a minister, raised them at the highest level, but not much action followed. Are we wasting our breath? Are we wasting the House's time? This is not a council of despair, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is essential that we continue to do as my honourable friend has done and persevere. We have to try and lift the odd starfish, as he says. even at the very least, we will have sent a powerful message to those prisoners, their relatives and friends, that they are not forgotten, that we do campaign for them, and indeed that we pray for them. We are reminded in chapter 12 of the Acts of the Apostles that St. Peter, guarded by 4 squads and chained between 2 soldiers, is sprung by an angel. And in chapter 16, Paul and Silas sprung in an earthquake and end up evangelizing the prison governor. Until these miraculous days return, however, we are confined to continuing to raise matters with ministers. Accordingly, I raise the case of Ali Minai, a young man in Iran, been in prison for the last year, sentenced for having attended a church service in somebody's home. He also has a severe heart condition. He is denied medical treatment in prison and has been subject to beatings, including blows to his chest. It's not untypical for Christians in Iran to be sentenced for crimes against state security, to be given long sentences, to have prolonged interrogation, sexual harassment, beatings, and to be denied privileges that other prisoners have access to. So I see young Ali as an archetype for all those prisoners of conscience that my honourable friend mentioned, be they imprisoned for advocating for human rights, for their insistence on freedom of expression, or because of their adherence to a minority faith, whether they be imprisoned in Xinjiang, in Hong Kong, in North Korea, in Afghanistan, in Turkey, in Egypt, in Venezuela, or wheresoever. I share a belief with my honourable friend that there will be a day of liberation when the prisoners will be freed, but that day of rapture will also be a day of wrath and judgment for their oppressors. We ought all to shrink from that judgment because we share in the guilt of their tormentors through our inaction and by our silence.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson James MacCleary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And first, can I thank the honourable member for Strangford for bringing this important debate to the Chamber. I think we would all agree that the number of people who are able to make it today is in no way a reflection of how importantly everyone holds this, and much more to do with democratic processes happening in parish halls and on doorsteps across the country right now. So as Liberal Democrats, we stand firmly in solidarity with those imprisoned for their political views around the world. We believe in free speech and the freedom to organise are fundamental to democratic rights, and those imprisoned for those causes are true symbols in the fight for democracy, free expression and the right to challenge government policies. The free practice of religion should be a universal right for all people, everywhere. It is vital that we shine a light on religious persecution wherever we find it and commit to opposing it with unwavering resolve. Many religious people globally face extreme forms of oppression, including threats to their very lives. We're deeply concerned by the lack of global action to safeguard religious freedoms, protect minority groups and uphold human rights. This must change. Liberal Democrats have a proud history as strong defenders of freedom of religion and belief. These are not just political positions, they are our core beliefs. Human rights and the rule of law stand at the very heart of what it means to be a Liberal Democrat. In our 2024 General Election Manifesto, we committed once again to protect, defend and promote human rights for all, including those persecuted for their religion or belief. We called for the appointment of an ambassador-level champion for freedom of belief and increased funding for humanitarian aid and asylum support for those fleeing religious persecution. We firmly believe that liberalism and cooperation have a vital role to play in securing peace, promoting democracy and defending human rights across the world. The UK must work with allies as a champion for freedom of belief. Today, certain countries have notably high numbers of prisoners of conscience, often tied to political regimes, religious repression or authoritarian governance. In China, the government's policies in Xinjiang have led to mass detention of Uyghur Muslims in re-education camps where they face torture and forced indoctrination. House church Christians face harassment, arrest and imprisonment simply for practicing their faith outside state control. The deliberate, systematic persecution of the Uyghur population means the standard for imposing sanctions under the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act meets the standard for imposing sanctions under the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act 2018. We call on the government to urgently issue its UK-China audit to set out a clear approach that includes work to shine a spotlight on Beijing's human rights abuses. Russia, under President Putin's increasingly authoritarian leadership, has seen a crackdown on opposition figures, journalists and minority religious groups. Jehovah's Witnesses have been labelled an extremist organisation, leading to numerous arrests.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
Certainly.
How grateful for the Honourable Member giving way. When in power, there are balances of opportunity and risk, aren't there? And one of the important points which was made by my honourable friend in his speech was that often ministers have bigger fish to fry when dealing with international relations. From his perspective, what is the right balance between standing up for human rights abuses and maintaining and developing relations with emerging powers such as China?
James MacCleary.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I think it's a really important question, one of the questions for British foreign policy as we go forward. It's not just China. We also look at such a country like Turkey at the moment, where we're seeing clear oppression of political opposition. But obviously Turkey plays a key role in defence in Europe and the future of European security in relation to Russia. So obviously you're completely correct about that. It's not for me to tell them how to get the balance right, but I think any government needs to have a set of principles it abides to and says this is our standard that we're setting and we apply it equally to everybody. And possibly those of us in the room might come to different conclusions to what those standards are, but I think you're absolutely right. And I do not underestimate the compromises that have to be made by government ministers. And obviously I'm not in that position, but there are those who sit in this room who are. So I really welcome the intervention and thank you. So talking of Russia, political dissidents and human rights activists in particular have been persecuted. A clear example was the late Alexei Navalny, who of course died in prison on dubious and politically motivated charges. The Honourable Member for Strangford mentioned Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who of course published the famous book Gulag Archipelago in the 1970s, which was so dangerous to the Soviet regime they actually suppressed it completely and banned it in Russia. A great example of how freedom of expression can play an important role in bringing down entire regimes, however secure they may seem at the time. We have a moral duty.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I should declare my interest as an unpaid trustee of the Index on Censorship. But thinking specifically about regimes like Russia and the importance of allowing journalists and activists and others to achieve a level of their freedom of expression in these very repressive regimes. What would he have to say about the support given via different government agencies for people in those sorts of situations?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I mean, it's an area of great importance, particularly in Russia, where the regime has become so stifling now that there is very little freedom of expression at all within the country, and we don't see very much. And I think Alexei Navalny was a great example of Vladimir Putin kind of completing his suppression of political opposition. I think it's fundamentally important for our government to be supporting voices for democracy and freedom across the whole world, and that is particularly important right now where we face this challenge from Russia where they are interfering in the internal processes of other countries. And I think it becomes particularly incumbent on leading democracies like ours to be finding ways to help promote freedom of expression, and the ability of journalists in particular to do their jobs is particularly important to that. So we have a moral duty, as I was saying, to stand up with those who risk everything for democratic and press freedom, from Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong to Mazia Amaglebeli in a journalist who was recently arrested in Georgia, one of those countries that is a good example of Russian overseas interference. The Honourable Member for New Forest West was quite right to mention as well Al-Abd al-Fattah, who is, of course, in prison in Egypt too. Their courage is a stark reminder that defending democratic values must never be selective or silent. In Iran, the regime maintains a strict interpretation of Shia Islam and enforces its religious laws through harsh measures. The Baha'i faith members are persecuted on charges of apostasy and heresy. Christians, especially converts from Islam, face arrest as conversion is considered a criminal offence. The recent crackdown following the death of Mahsa Amini demonstrates the regime's continued brutality. According to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, there are currently 1,342 individuals assessed as imprisoned for their religion or belief, with the highest numbers found in China, Russia and Iran. The government must do more work with our international partners to secure the protection of religious rights and robustly challenge states to ensure all people are safe to worship and express their political beliefs. This must include states upholding Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees the right of freedom of thought, conscience and religion. We call for specific actions. First, using the UK's Magnitsky sanctions to stand up against human rights abuses. Second, banning imports from areas with egregious abuses, such as Xinjiang. Third, enshrining in law a right for British nationals who have been politically detained abroad to access UK consular services. Fourth, developing a comprehensive strategy for promoting the decriminalisation of homosexuality and advancing LGBT+ rights globally. And finally, stronger UK engagement with international bodies such as the United Nations, the European Union and the Commonwealth to promote religious freedom worldwide. We call for a long-term comprehensive global strategy to protect freedom of expression, political and religious rights, and to create a world where no one is imprisoned for peacefully expressing their beliefs. The Liberal Democrats strongly oppose any form of authoritarian or totalitarian rule that seeks to imprison or silence individuals for their beliefs. We will continue to urge the government to use the UK's influence in foreign policy to promote and protect these values. Our commitment is clear.
Jerome Mayhew.
There's a dichotomy here, I suggest, which is that the Liberal Democrats profess that they're against authoritarian rule, and yet for us to project power internationally, so even if it's soft power, there's a risk that we're involving ourselves in the democratic or the sovereign decisions of independent countries. Does he accept that there's a bit of a tension there, where we seek to impose our values on other cultures and countries? Where does he think the right balance lies on that issue?
James MacCleary.
There are whole books on liberalism written about this very topic, as you probably know. I think that the situation with the United States at the moment has really brought this into sharp focus. I think for many years we've heard many other countries around the world speaking about how America at times, with our support, has intervened in the internal affairs of other countries, and they've said, how is that consistent when you complain about us doing it? And now America is taking a very different role. I think some people are perhaps reassessing what is the level that you can go to. Look, I can't really answer the question right now. I'm very happy to have a separate discussion with you if you like. But I think that is what you're touching on, and I think it is something that I think all of us in this chamber who are interested in foreign affairs have to think about, is where that line is. And of course, famously, the Americans refer to the Mogadishu line as a line they crossed in Somalia, where they felt they got too involved in the internal affairs of a country. So clearly it's literally a physical thing, but I thank him for the intervention. So just to finish up, our commitment is clear: to protect, defend and promote human rights for all around the world. We will not rest until every person can freely express their beliefs without fear of persecution. Thank you.
Shadow Minister Andrew Rosindell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I firstly begin by extending my thanks to the honourable gentleman, the member for Strangford, for securing this important debate here this afternoon. He is a tireless defender of human rights, and his dedication to the cause of those who are persecuted for their beliefs, wherever they may be, is courageous, admirable and much needed, and I thank him for it. And I would also like to thank
the Backbench Business Committee for enabling this discussion to take place this afternoon. It's a vital debate that we should be having. It's only a shame there aren't more honourable members here this afternoon to take part in these discussions. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this country, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, has long been a sanctuary for the oppressed, and this chamber a voice for the voiceless and a champion of liberty. From the days of William Wilberforce to the last government's establishment of a special envoy for freedom of religion and belief, this House of Commons has stood up for the fundamental freedoms of speech, conscience and belief, and long may that continue. And so today I wish to speak for those who cannot speak freely themselves, those who languish in prison cells, not for any crime, but simply for having the courage to believe differently, to respectfully challenge authority, or to follow their conscience in the face of tyranny. Now, today, Madam Deputy Speaker, we've had a short debate, but a very meaningful one, with some excellent contributions from colleagues on all sides of the House. So the Honourable Member for Strangford, who spoke passionately, as he always does, told us about the importance of defending those who profess their faith and upholding their convictions, and also the importance of standing up for freedom. And that's something that has always inspired me in politics, the love of freedom. And I grew up in the 1980s when we had a Prime Minister who defended freedom around the world. Margaret Thatcher stood up against totalitarianism and communism across the world, and particularly in those days against the Soviet Union. And it is our belief on this side of the House in freedom and liberty that I believe drives us. Love of country is part of that, being a nation that has always stood up for the liberties and freedoms of the people of these islands. She's left her place, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I have great admiration for the member for Ealing-Acton, and I work closely with her on the issue of Armenia, and we recall the Armenian genocide 110 years ago, and she referred to her constituent Anat Moskvin, who I also know very well. We worked together on upholding the freedom of the people of Armenia, and it has been referred to, the Honourable Lady, about the prisoners that are kept in Azerbaijani jails and how they also need to have their freedom, and Armenia needs to live as an independent free democracy without fear, and the people must be allowed to express their views freely. And I attended a wreath laying at the Cenotaph only last week with the Honourable Member and others, cross-party, in support of our friends from Armenia, a Christian country that simply wants to be democratic and independent and not be threatened by an aggressive neighbour. No one in this House could ever compete with the passion and the belief and the deeply held views of the Right Honourable Member for New Forest West, who sits behind me now, someone I've admired ever since I entered this House in 2001. He speaks with enormous passion, and he understands that this country is a Christian country, and our laws and our traditions and our customs are founded on those Christian traditions. And if we discard them, we discard everything we have in this country. It doesn't mean we don't respect other religions, but our Christian heritage is fundamental. And it is our Christian heritage that leads Britain to be a champion of freedom, free speech, freedom of religion and democracy around the world, which we have been far longer than most other countries in the world today. And he reminded us, quite rightly, of how our own Royal Navy eroded the slave trade. It's often forgotten it was Britain that led the way against the slave trade, but he rightly reminded us of that today. And I thank him for everything he does to stand up for the rights of the oppressed, and particularly those religious minorities that are denied the right to worship and practice freely. And the member for Lewes, the spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, who I thought spoke extremely well and raised a lot of issues which I think would be common throughout this House. Particularly, he spoke about the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, the importance of the China audit, which I believe we're still waiting for, and it's very important we get on with that. But the moral duty to stand up for those who have lost their freedom, and Britain has a proud record of this, and I think that transcends party politics, and I'm sure in this House it will do again today. And he also mentioned those of the Baha'i faith who are persecuted, and that's another very important point. And superb interventions from my honourable friend, the member for Broadland and Fakenham, who's now left his place. But he spoke about, rightly so, that the balance between dealing with nations around the world. We want good relations, we want trade and cooperation, and economically we want to work with many countries, but equally so, we need to think about the human rights. We need to balance those things. And equally so, he spoke about imposing our values on other countries, which is always a balance. We can't impose British values on every country of different traditions and religions, but nevertheless, we should never be silent when we see an injustice. And I know that certainly on this side of the House, and I'm sure on the government side as well, standing up for injustice, wherever it may be in the world, is something that we all stand for as people that believe in freedom and democracy. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to rightly focus on those that members have mentioned today who are detained in prisons wrongly for their religion or belief. So what practical steps is His Majesty's Government taking to monitor, identify and support such individuals? The Minister will need to tell us very clearly today, and she has lots of time to answer all these questions, what resources are being allocated by the FCDO to monitor prisoners of conscience globally. And how is this information being used in the UK's broader human rights strategy? And as a member of the Article 18 Alliance, will the Minister tell us if the UK actively propose names for international advocacy? And, as we have already heard, the statistics are deeply alarming. According to the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, more than 1,300 individuals are currently imprisoned for their beliefs in just 28 countries. And that includes 532 people in Communist China, 327 people in Putin's Russia, and 87 people in Iran. And other members today have mentioned other countries where there are similar issues that need to be addressed. Vietnam and North Korea were mentioned. Member for Ealing-Acton mentioned Azerbaijan and Armenia, which I referred to earlier. Member for New Forest West quite rightly mentioned Venezuela. I met a delegation from Venezuela only last week, and in fact I was an observer at a Venezuelan election some years ago. It wasn't very democratic, I have to say, and I don't think much has changed since. In fact, it's got a lot worse. So that is a country we should absolutely be highlighting as one in need of radical democratic change. And he also mentioned Egypt and Turkey. There are many others we could think of today. But the point being, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that Britain must lead the way. We are the nation that always stands up for the rights and freedoms of peoples, and we must do so today with vigour and without compromise. And so, will the Minister confirm whether the government has raised specific cases with these governments and others, and if so, will she tell us which ones she has been speaking to in recent days? I'm aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this debate is centred on matters of faith. However, I, along with the member for Strangford, want to take the opportunity to raise the case of Apple News founder Jimmy Lai. We need to see Jimmy Lai released, an end to his politically motivated trial, and the repeal of the draconian national security law in Hong Kong. It is one matter to speak in this place regarding individuals far afield who have little to no connection with these islands, but it is another when the matter involves a British national. So, what developments have there been on this so far? We talk a lot about this, but we see very little action. So, given the government looks as though it seems to become more economically aligned to China, which I personally think is a huge error, will Jimmy Lai's case be front and centre in our engagements with Beijing? And has she specifically called for Jimmy Lai's release with her Chinese counterparts? Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to commend the All-Party Parliamentary Group for International Freedom of Religion or Belief, and in particular, as I've already said, the tireless efforts of the Honourable Member for Strangford and all members of that group for their laudable initiative in launching a scheme that enables members of this House to advocate for individual prisoners of conscience. This initiative represents a meaningful and compassionate step towards amplifying the voices of those who have been unjustly detained for exercising their fundamental rights. In light of this important work, I must ask the Minister whether the FCDO is actively supporting this endeavour by assisting members in establishing contact with relevant embassies here in the United Kingdom, as well as engaging with international, legal and diplomatic mechanisms to strengthen advocacy on behalf of these individuals. I am pleased that the Government heeded the call on this side of the House in renewing the last government's position in having a special envoy for freedom of belief and religion. However, can the Minister outline exactly what the special envoy is doing to advance the cause of individual prisoners of conscience? And has the envoy engaged directly with foreign governments or institutions to press for their release? And does the government intend to enshrine the post in law, just as my good friend, the former member for Congleton, Fiona Bruce, passionately campaigned for when she served in this House only up until last year? And also, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I say that Britain has long used both aid and diplomacy to promote our values abroad. In this context, may I ask the Minister whether the allocation of UK aid to recipient countries is ever made conditional upon demonstrable progress in safeguarding freedom of religion and belief. Specifically, is consideration given to the treatment of individuals who are imprisoned solely on account of their religious convictions? And is our financial assistance ever leveraged to encourage reform and accountability in such cases? Those in prison today for their beliefs, be they Christian, Ahmadi Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, or any other religion, or members of minority or non-religious communities, deserve more than just our concern. They deserve our advocacy, our voice, and our unwavering defence. Madam Deputy Speaker, our foreign policy must reflect not only our national interests, but a projection of how we treat our own people. We must never shy away from calling out the wickedness and unjust imprisonment, or from defending the right to freedom of conscience. As the great John Stuart Mill, once a member of this House, so wisely said, "Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing." We look forward to this government doing something.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a real pleasure to serve under your chairship and also to respond to members in what's been a fascinating debate. And I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for Strangford for securing the debate and for the contributions of other Honourable Members, and I will try and respond to all the points raised. The government stands in solidarity with those in prison solely based on their religious or other beliefs, and we call on governments to ensure the right to freedom of religion or belief is protected and promoted for all everywhere, because societies which respect and uphold human rights, including freedom of religion or belief, are generally stronger, more stable and prosperous. As many in the Chamber have so eloquently articulated, the scale of freedom of religion or belief abuses and violations globally are of grave concern. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. However, the reality faced by many, including, let's say, the Baha'i community in Yemen and Iran, the Ahmadis in Pakistan, the harassment and arbitrary detention of church members in Nicaragua, and non-Muslims caught up in Sudan's civil war, is far removed from this. Persecution, harassment, discrimination and arbitrary detention is sadly part of daily life for many. And the member for Ealing Central and Acton and the spokesperson for His Majesty's opposition have both mentioned Armenians and the current issue of Armenians in detention following the recent conflict with Azerbaijan. And also the Annette Moscovian has had a few mentions because she is such an ardent believer in freedom of religion or belief and is the constituent of the member for Ealing Central and Acton. So, of course, that is why we're working hard to highlight and address the scale and severity of freedom of religion or belief abuses and violations, including lobbying for the release of prisoners of conscience. And I'll set out some examples. Pastor Lorenzo Rosales Fajardos, a pastor and leader for an independent church in Cuba, was imprisoned for participating in peaceful protests in Cuba. The Foreign Secretary wrote to him in December last year to express solidarity and called upon the Cuban authorities for his release, and we were delighted to hear that he was released in January. And as the member for New Forest West said, we mustn't have a council of despair. Occasionally we get good news on these cases. And Mubarak Bala, mentioned already in the debate, a Nigerian atheist and president of the Humanist Society of Nigeria who was sentenced to 24 years for his belief. We regularly lobbied the Nigerian government, including letters to the Kano state governor and calls for his release by ministers, and we were pleased to hear that he also was freed in January. There are, of course, many other examples, and I will try to set out what we're doing to support them. The UK is determined to use its extensive diplomatic network to champion freedom of religion or belief on the international stage. And members have mentioned in the debate that our human rights approach is being refreshed by the Minister for Human Rights in the other place, Lord Collins, and he will come to Parliament in the usual way to lay that out when it's completed. And I was very pleased to meet my honourable friend, the member for Northumberland, earlier this week to discuss his role as the UK Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief. Specifically on the question of the bill proposing that we make the role of Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief statutory, while we recognise the benefits of the role, we do not believe that the value is enhanced by making the position statutory. So we shall continue with the last government's approach under the excellent Fiona Bruce to maintain the role as an office within the Foreign Office, but having a strong sense of challenge.
Welcome the tone in which this is being conducted. May I ask her, given that she won't make that statutory, will she also state very clearly that she won't make something else statutory, which is to reintroduce a blasphemy law into the United Kingdom? She'll recognise that the abolition of the blasphemy laws in the 1980s and 90s meant that people could express whatever belief they happened to hold in a completely free way. It ended a level of oppression that had been possible, though not exercised, for many, many years. Will she make it absolutely clear that this government will in no way support a blasphemy law, will not allow police to introduce one through the back door by criminalising acts that would otherwise be freedom of expression? Will she make it absolutely clear that His Majesty's government stands for the freedom of religion and non-belief, not just the freedom of belief, and that means the freedom to change your religion, to reject a previous religion, or indeed to criticise any religion? Would she agree with that?
Minister.
Of course, I agree that freedom of religion or belief, or the right to have no belief at all, is critical and paramount. And I know that organisations like the one that the member for West Sussex is on, Index on Censorship, is also very robust in this regard, that it is crucial that we do have the right to have freedom of expression. And certainly on the finer points of his question, if he'd like to write to me, I'll be very happy to write back in the particular language that he would prefer.
Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for giving way. I was pleased by her answer to my right honourable friend. If we are talking about freedom of expression internationally, we do have to be incredibly careful about freedom of expression in our own country. And while government ministers do often say that they oppose blasphemy laws, we've seen the use of Section 4 of the Public Order Act 1986 used to prosecute people for acts of protest, including damaging the Quran. Is this not, in reality, the development of a backdoor blasphemy law?
Minister.
I could just reiterate my position that we uphold freedoms, and on the specific point that he'd like me to fall into a trap on, if he can write to me so that I can get exactly the right language, I'd be pleased to do that. Now, I wanted just to pursue my point on the importance of it not being a council of despair, which was the New Forest West's, a member for New Forest West point. And a couple of members this afternoon have mentioned the country of Vietnam. And while there are a number of concerns, including some that I raised with the Vice Foreign Minister for Vietnam on her recent visit to the UK in the context of discussions on matters of bilateral interest, I was very pleased to read that there's been an 83% acceptance rate under the Universal Periodic Review recommendations, and I hope that Vietnam will be able to develop a national master plan that specifies concrete, measurable and time-bound actions to follow up on the Universal Periodic Review recommendations, and we offer the expertise that we have at the Foreign Office and stand ready to share our experience as we go on that journey together. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is determined to use its extensive diplomatic network, as I mentioned, and the priorities of the member for North Northumberland will become clear as he meets with each of the ministers to lay out his concerns. And with his background from the Bible Society, I know that he will have a lot in common with the member who's brought the debate today, and I'm sure that they will bring more debates in the future to continue to challenge ministers on these important matters. Just to give some further examples, last week the Freedom of Religion or Belief Envoy and Minister for the Middle East and North Africa met with the former prisoner of conscience Dr. Nada al-Sakaf, who was arbitrarily detained by the Houthis in 2016 for his association with the Office of the Public Affairs of the Baha'i community of Yemen. They heard about his experience in Yemen and discussed ways in which the government can support this individual and these sorts of cases. I also wanted to highlight the vital work of human rights defenders in addressing freedom of religion or belief abuses and violations, including arrests and arbitrary detention. As the Foreign Secretary said in his Human Rights Day speech in December last year, human rights defenders around the world risk their liberty and often their lives for their belief in upholding fundamental human rights for all, through protesting, documenting human rights abuses, supporting political prisoners and standing up for democracy and justice. Without human rights defenders, we would not know the full scale of abuses and violations. And I just think of the tragic story this week of Victoria Roshnia, who was a journalist and whose body was returned without organs to her family following detention in Russia. And I know that that will be of interest to the member for West Sussex and his association with the Index on Censorship. Absolutely tragic case, just for this week. The UK is pleased to support important flexible funds like Lifeline, which has provided almost 100 grants to civil society organisations under threat in over 30 countries since July 2024. Turning now to our bilateral engagements, the government does not shy away from challenging countries who are not meeting their obligations. We continue to highlight our concerns both publicly and in private. Just to give one example, a central part of our work in Pakistan. My honourable friend, the Minister for the Middle East and North Africa, visited Pakistan in November of last year and was able to advocate for freedom of religion or belief with government ministers, business and religious leaders. High Commission officials, including our political counsellor, regularly meet with representatives from the Ahmadi, Christian, Hindu and Sikh communities, and we follow the same approach with the Nigerian government, including during Nigeria's recent Universal Periodic Review last year. We're investing £38 million through our Strengthening Peace and Resilience programme in Nigeria to help address the root causes of conflict in the Middle Belt and beyond. This in turn builds the capacity of the country's security forces to tackle violence against all civilian communities, including those of different religious backgrounds and belief. Finally, in Syria, very much in the news this week, we have made clear that the government must ensure the protection of all civilians, set out a clear path to transitional justice, and make progress towards an inclusive political transition, and we will judge them by their actions. The Shadow Minister asked how conditional our support was in order to try and push for better human rights, and I can guarantee that in the discussions about lifting sanctions in recent months following the ceasefire in Syria, we were able to discuss in that context our vision for more freedoms for all of the different groups within Syria. Moving on now to our multilateral work. At the UN, we regularly participate in interactive dialogues with the Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Religion or Belief. In March, our Special Envoy was in Geneva to engage in a session on the intersection between freedom of religion or belief and torture. Last October, we participated in the interactive dialogue in New York on the link between freedom of religion and peace. We frequently raise freedom of religion or belief during the UN's Universal Periodic Review process, for example, in our statements on Bhutan, Nicaragua and Qatar last November. In the case of Nicaragua, we noted our increasing alarm at the deteriorating human rights situation, including the harassment and arbitrary detention of members of the church and the closure of organisations affiliated with it. And finally, we continue to work closely with the OSCE as well, which provides a valuable platform for us to discuss and consider freedom of religion or belief and related issues. Now, many members have mentioned Article 18, and that's why Article 18 Alliance is called the Article 18 Alliance. And of course, the coalition of 43 countries formed to defend and advance religious freedom globally. And I know that the member who brought the debate today is very involved in this alliance. The UK is an active member of it as well and works closely to combat discrimination and persecution based on freedom of religion or belief. That includes highlighting specific cases of prisoners of conscience and co-sponsoring statements and campaigning for their release. Just one, for example, a chair's statement on Tibetan religious prisoners of conscience, Gidwan Choiki Nyima. Linked to these important campaigns, we've also worked closely with Article 18 Alliance on statements which condemn violations of freedom of religion or belief and promote mutual respect between different religions or belief groups. For example, in November last year, we joined an important statement which condemned anti-Muslim hatred and urged countries to uphold the right to freedom of religion or belief. Just before I conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, there were a couple of points which I didn't cover in my speech. The member for Lewes talked about China, and I wanted to reassure him that we raise our concerns at the highest level, and a number of people have mentioned what I believe to be one of our most high-profile prisoners of conscience currently, Jimmy Lai. And just this week I met Sebastian Lai, and I discuss regularly with Sebastian's constituency MP, who sits on our benches, his progress and how he's getting on. And our staff in Hong Kong attend regularly the court to watch every single element of that procedure, and we are working very hard to continue to keep that at the highest level, whether that's Prime Minister to President, Foreign Secretary to Foreign Minister, myself when I can as well at ministerial level. And he also asked about the China audit, and I can confirm that we will be bringing forward the China audit soon, and that within the process of that I have met with Rahima Mahmood regarding the situation for Uyghurs. He'd be well aware that there is ongoing concern for the situation for Uyghurs, and I wanted to reassure him and others watching this debate that that is definitely a subject that we have looked at and the impact it has on our day-to-day lives around business practices here in the UK, and wanted to reassure him on that. Briefly on Iran, we know that Christians in Iran are persecuted, whether it's the ethnic Armenian and Assyrian Christians who face political, economic and social barriers, who are entitled to freedoms as a protected minority, formally, but of course are unable often to practice their religion and are banned from preaching to other Iranians. Persian Christians and converts from Islam considered apostates face severe harassment, detention and lengthy prison sentences. Christians often face propaganda charges as a result of their religious activity. The UK is on the core group for the recurring Iran resolution led by Canada, which always includes language relating to freedom of religious belief and Christians. We're looking forward to the next UN 3C resolution, which shall be tabled in November 2025. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've had a very good debate. Thank you for your patience. To conclude, this government remains committed to addressing the issues of prisons of conscience and freedom of religion or belief. No one should suffer for their beliefs, and we will continue to promote and protect freedom of religion or belief at every opportunity.
Jim Shannon to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank all of the right honourable and honourable members for their participation in the debate today on the prisoners of conscience and the importance of what everyone brought: faith, freedom of religion and belief, persecution of those religious minorities and human rights are both married together. If you're hurting people with persecution of religion, you're hurting their human rights and vice versa. So all the members are right to say that. Today this House has been a voice for the voices, a hope for those with no hope. The Shadow Minister referred to never to be silent when we see an injustice. He's right, and we won't be in this House. My honourable friend, the member for New Forest, referred to that today will not be a council of despair. Honourable gentleman and I and many others in this chamber share a religious belief. The honourable member referred to prayer. Pray every day, pray earnestly, pray fervently, pray often. And he's right to say that, because that's what we should do. I remind the House of the story of William Wilberforce. When he spoke in this House, often did against slavery. There may today be but a few of us here, but remember, it only takes a few to make a change. And William Wilberforce never saw the complete abolition of slavery in his time, but his actions made a difference. So thank you to all of those who made a difference today.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.